Welcome to Hull and Estate and Succession Planning, a series of podcasts hosted by Ian Hull and Suzana Popovic-Montag. The podcast you are listening to will provide information and insights into estate planning in Canada. From the offices of Hull in Toronto, here are Ian and Suzana.
Hi, and welcome to Hull and Estate and Succession Planning. You're listening, and some of you may be watching, episode 170 of our podcast on Tuesday, June 30th, 2009.
Hi, Suzana.
Hi there, Ian. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks.
That's good.
Well, let's continue with our discussion on the family property because it is June 30th, and we're really heavy into cottage time.
Yes.
Tomorrow in Canada is a big holiday, and in the U.S. it'll be a bigger holiday even, no doubt. July 4th will come shortly thereafter. It's sort of a strange holiday in Canada this year because it's landing on a Wednesday.
That's right.
And but it's still a cottage time, and we've got to talk about cottage country. I think we should be talking about what's a Cottage Living or one of those magazines. We should have them like our sponsor or something.
That's right.
We should call that. Make mental note on that. And secondly, I want to apologize that the books were crooked in our last podcast, and we fixed that. So for those of you who are watching it, you can see that we actually, on rare occasion, make visual mistakes. Okay, so let's jump back into our cottage discussion. And where we left it off was really how will we manage the emotional. And we've spent lots of time in our podcasts on how we think we can manage emotional issues and transfers of wealth. And we've sort of drilled down and talked about how we're going to manage the tax issue. Mm-hmm. And I am a basic, simple person, and I try to earn a living communicating simple concepts. What is the most simple way to manage the transfer of wealth of a cottage? That is, gift it during your lifetime. All right. Now that is part of our managing the tax issue, because the impact of gifting during your lifetime addresses two fundamental points. And one, it immediately addresses who's going to get the cottage,
yes.
And secondly, it immediately addresses the tax issue. Because in Canada, you gift, you pay the tax.
Yep.
So there's a deemed disposition that's crystallized. You don't enjoy the deferred tax. So although it sounds simple, it really does address two core issues with the transfer of any emotionally based asset like a cottage. Mm-hmm. So the gifting idea, I think, is a powerful tool, and one that is often ignored because it makes us talk about who's going to get the cottage. All right, and we can talk about in a later podcast what you do once you've gifted it. It doesn't mean that you just throw it into the fray. You can set up agreements and so on. We're going to get into some of that. But it allows you to force the communication issue, which is some people are afraid of, but is a powerful tool in proper and effective estate planning. When I say proper, I mean people can decide to wait till they die, but effective estate planning is when you do something while you're alive. Yep. And it's akin to why do people wait to die until they die to give to charity? I mean, you get the good feeling while you're alive. And you might get that good feeling while you're alive if you do gift it, or you might not. You might create the hornet's nest and have to address the tensions and so on. But the gifting element deals with the emotional issue. And secondly, it deals with the fundamental issue in most people with modest wealth, and that is, how are we going to deal with the tax? Well, we're going to face it while we're alive.
That's
we're
right.
not going to pass that problem on either.
And you crystallize it, as you say, Ian, and you deal with it while you're there, while you have the ability to explain it if you need to. But you also have the downside of the fact that you've suddenly divested yourself, possibly, unless you've done some fancy stuff on the side, of this asset. And so that's something that we find that people tend to struggle with, and probably why they shy away from gifting during their lifetime, for the most part.
Yeah, and look, there's lots of reasons why you shouldn't. But I think that if there's anything that our brochure is trying to do is an issue identify. And that's like anything in life. We can't pigeonhole every solution with the same solutions for every person. We have to give options, and that's what we do for a living. And the sale option, the gifting option is one that I just think people overlook too quickly. When they see what the consequences of the alternatives are instead of facing the music. But anyway, it doesn't work for everyone.
That's right.
So gifting is, although one of my favorite tools, and not that I'm looking to have my parents gift their cottage to me, because
I know your kids are waiting for you to gift yours to them.
no problem, they can have it as long as they'll pay the taxes.
No, you just told us you would have to pay those taxes.
Well, I'll even pay the taxes. They just have to pay the property taxes. But my 10-year-old daughter will have some trouble with that. She's not good about giving up any money. But So the next simple, and we're keeping this simple at this point, and that is because I think, and to be fair, our last podcast dealt with some of the concepts that get a bit complicated. We're bringing it back to my level, and that is non-tax. What is the basics, and yet effective? And the second, what is the next simple option that you would think of in terms of dealing with the cottage?
That, of course, would be the sale of the property.
Absolutely. So again, it allows us to crystallize the issue. Who are we going to sell it to, at what price, and what are we going to do about the tax? And the sale, it in effect puts it into the marketplace. Right? Even the family marketplace. Now, again, we may be upsetting the apple cart because some members of the family can afford to buy, some can't. Some are prepared to do it on a shared basis, some aren't. It doesn't really matter to me. I say to my clients, it doesn't really matter. What you're doing is you're throwing it into the marketplace. And if within your family marketplace at the first level, if it can be purchased, financed, whatever, multiple purchasers, whatever, you're making the next generation deal with the issue while you're alive in front of you.
Yes.
And so they'll create lots of tension and so on, but they can't hide from the fact that you're alive and you're seeing how they're behaving. And so the sale option, again, excites me as an option, because one of the things that, when you're talking about communicating with family, it really frustrates me is that there is this certain expectation that the parents have to do all the work.
Yes.
And that they have to bring them together and they have to do all the work. That is true to a certain extent. But the point is that what we call in our business the heavy lifting. Who's going to do the heavy lifting? Well, the recipients have to do some of that heavy lifting. They have to face the music.
Yes.
And not defer what isn't often the case, reality. And that reality is some family members may never be able to purchase the cottage. And in some cases, in some families, what better time to face that than when your parents are alive?
That's right. Well, the glue is still there, right?
Exactly. That's the key.
The parents, the glue of the family, and once they're gone, it's a lot harder to keep that together. But if they're still there, they're seeing perhaps if there is going to be tensions unfolding, they can still deal with it. Can't do that once you're dead.
You really can't. And so by doing that, I like that glue analogy, because you've got the glue that holds together the process, such as rigid and flipping around, and like there's one mom's mad, daughter's mad, son's mad, whatever. But you've got the parents holding the glue together. And secondly, you've got a transaction, a business transaction that is final and imposing on the parties. And you can't get these lawsuits later that say, oh my gosh, I didn't know what was going on, or I never, so-and-so swiped the cottage from underneath me, and all of that secrecy. There is complete transparency with that process. And while again, can bring some pain, can bring some tension, what better way of facing the music than I got a contract that says Billy and Fred bought the cottage off me, and I'm actually gonna use it for the rest of my life. I'm gonna sign a side agreement to them to that effect. We work those details out, and that's for a later podcast, but we have a binding contract.
And you've crystallized the two issues again that are the hot spots for a cottage property. Firstly, you've crystallized and the capital gains tax on the transfer of the property, and secondly, you've chosen the person to whom it's going to go.
Right.
And sure, there could be a side issue of whether or not that was done at the right price, at fair market value, this or that, but you've got the family still there, the family unit in sense there to deal with that and the difficulties that might arise from that. So we've got the glue still in place.
And you've got the chance of throwing it into the fair market if it doesn't work within the family. All right, so we've got two exciting, simple ideas. Only works for some, doesn't work for others, but again, we're about options. Our next podcast we're going to talk about, and you said earlier, is that what if my 10-year-old daughter, I want to gift it to her, all right? And that's the whole concept of putting it into a trust and so on. So let's talk about that, and we're going from very simple at the gifting to less simple on the sale, to a little more complicated on the trust, but again, core options that may fit into, depending on your circumstances, better with some, better with others. So let's talk about that in our next podcast. Thanks very much.
Thanks to you too, Ian.
You have been listening to Hall and Estate and Succession Planning by Ian Hall and Suzana Popovic-Montag. The podcast that you have been listening to has been provided as an information service. It is a summary of current issues in estates and estate planning. It is not legal advice, and you're reminded to always speak with a legal professional regarding your specific circumstance. To listen to other Hull & Hull podcasts or leave any questions or comments, please visit our website at hullestatemediation.com.